All right. All right. So then welcome everyone to our event, Sudan Coup event, what is happening in Sudan. And this is part of a kind of international, more or less coalition of students, of Sudanese students, trying to just raise awareness of what's happening, trying to support and create a network. This is the Sudanese Sandstorm series. And this, I guess, rendition of the event, one of the first events, I guess the first event technically, through our Sudanese Student Union here at Johns Hopkins. We have some great speakers for you lined up today in our panel section of it. So the way it's going to work is we're just going to have a little bit of an overview of what's happening in Sudan right now. Just a brief history, a short little video, some context, and then we're going to get into, introducing our speakers and the questions that we have lined up, as well as anything you guys may have to ask them as well. And we can just have a discussion from there. So let me go ahead and go to this next slide. So I guess we're just gonna do a little bit of introductions here of what our SSU, who our SSU consists of on campus. So everyone, my name is Ashraf. I'm a senior studying neuroscience here at Hopkins. I'm the president of the SSU this year. And we have a few members of the board present with us today. So we can go ahead and if someone wants to just introduce themselves, I guess Ayat, you can go next if you want to.
Yeah, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Ayat. I'm a senior studying public health and minoring in psychology. And I'm
So I think you cut out, but I think we got it. We got most of it, Vice President Ayat. And then if anyone wants to go next, Ayat.
Hi, I'm Ala. I'm a junior majoring in neuroscience, minoring in art history, and I'm the events chair for SSU.
Nice. And then AB, the creator, tech master of this beautiful PowerPoint as well.
My name is AB. I'm a junior, AB Abdul Rahman. I'm a junior studying computer science, and I'm tech master for SSU.
Great. Thank you for that. And we have some other members who are either will be joining us shortly or some of them actually can't make it tonight. We have Sad, our secretary, Ayad and Mazen, our publicity chairs, co-publicity chairs, and then Talal, our treasurer of the organization. So let me go ahead and what we're going to do right quick actually is just, most of you obviously may be aware, this is more so for context of people who are outside Sudan, not really familiar with the history of the country and everything that's been breaking down. So this video is a little bit nuanced. There's definitely some points that they miss. There's some things that are like out of context. But I thought it was overall an okay, a shorter video to just show a general quick background of a little bit of the relations of the country. And so I'm gonna go ahead and play it right quick.
Imagine living through coup attempts
Can you all
every
hear this?
decade for the past 60 years. That's exactly what's happened in Sudan, the northeastern African state with more than 40 million people. In October 2021, thousands of people flooded the streets after the military seized power in another coup. So what's gone wrong? The most important thing to understand is that Sudan's economic hardships and political instability didn't happen on their own.
It didn't happen out of a vacuum. You have the Sudan, it's plagued by a number of civil wars throughout the time, from its time of its independence. You will have a lack of unity. You have different superpowers that are getting involved.
Yes, foreign intervention. First, it was the British Empire. The British colonized Sudan at the turn of the 20th century, sharing colonial control with Egypt, which was subordinate to Britain. British colonialists invested heavily in the north, while Egypt ruled over the south. Britain put northern leaders in positions of authority, modernized schools, and encouraged Islam, while in the south, British rulers scattered power among hundreds of tribal leaders, and Christian missionaries ran the education system. This colonial tactic of divide and rule created socio-economic tensions that played a role in Sudan's future conflicts.
And then it culminated with these various civil wars that occurred throughout the history of Sudan.
Sudan gained independence from British colonial rule in 1956, but its troubles didn't end there. As part of the Horn of Africa, Sudan was extremely important in geopolitics. Injections of weapons from world superpowers, including the United States, aggravated existing class, ethnic, and religious tensions. In fact, Sudan has often been dubbed as, quote, Africa's arms dump. During the Cold War, Sudan was one of many countries ravaged by the US and Soviet Union waging war via local proxies. The US alone sold Sudanese governments nearly $1 billion in arms during that time, and today, Sudan is one of Russia's biggest customers on the African continent. So, Sudan inherited colonial engineered ethnic tension and was armed by countries eyeing Sudan's geopolitical importance, and that's why it's not a coincidence that armed conflicts have consistently flared up in Sudan. Since gaining independence, Sudan went through 2 civil wars, just 11 years apart, the second of which left around 2 million people dead and more than 4 million displaced. Government-backed militia groups massacred countless Darfuri civilians in 2003 after anti-government armed groups began fighting the state. All this political instability meant the economy was going to struggle, which in turn only worsened the political instability. A bad foundation set by exploitative colonial practices and frequent armed conflicts was already hampering Sudan's economic development. US sanctions and the independence of South Sudan added more challenges in managing the economy. In 1997, the US placed debilitating sanctions on Sudan after labeling it as a state sponsor of terrorism. Based on false claims that a pharmaceutical factory was producing chemical weapons for Al-Qaeda, the US bombed the factory in Khartoum, Sudan's capital. The 20-year sanctions cut Sudan off from most international trade. Essential items like healthcare equipment and airplane parts became inaccessible. In 2011, after the long haul of the Second Civil War, South Sudan gained independence. The secession of South Sudan meant that Sudan lost an estimated 75% of its oil reserves and a huge chunk of its income. It's therefore no surprise that 36% of Sudan's population were thought to be living in poverty in 2014. The US did eventually lift sanctions in 2017, but in the shadow of the sanctions' long-lasting effects, life for many Sudanese people didn't improve. In 2019, the Sudanese military took control after protests swept across the country due to rising food and fuel prices. Omar al-Bashir, a military-backed ruler who stayed in power for 30 years, was overthrown. But pro-democracy groups couldn't force the military out of power. Civilian leaders and military heads were supposed to co-govern the country until 2023 to run a democratic election and transition to a completely civilian-led government. But the deteriorating economy and COVID pandemic made things even harder. Protests broke out calling for military reform and full civilian rule. But like more than a dozen times before, the military took over and dissolved the transitional government. With foreign intervention, historical ethnic tension, heavily armed conflict, and economic struggle, the 2021 coup has thrown Sudan into another wave of uncertainty, but also into another wave of resistance.
The people should have the power. The people have taken to the streets. The people are voicing their displeasure. For the most part, the people themselves are truly interested in removing the military from power and having democratic elections and having a civilian government. So yes, the people themselves actually need to run the government, be in charge of their own fate, because for so long they have not been able to. They've been denied this.
Imagine living through.
All right, so yeah, that was just a little bit of a quick overview. Some of the things I mentioned, I mean, that you all may be aware of as well. It was a little bit of some things that I even just heard, I guess, even critique about the videos. They didn't really mention about what foreign powers' role is currently in the situation and how they're, backing the military and really, I guess, pushing for like no negotiations in a sense. And so that's something we'll even get to. But before then, we just want to give a little bit of context of what's going on now. And so, as some of you may know as well, the Sudanese military and the civilian democracy groups, they have been in a jointly run transitional government following the removal of Omar al-Bashir. This was, after 2019 and onwards. And then after weeks of tensions in the past months, they basically military Sudanese, they seized power and they arrested Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and other officials. They declared a state of emergency, a Burhan, and basically made clear that the military will remain in charge. And after this, a lot of citizens took to the streets to protest the coup, just because of the history of Sudan and everything that the country's been going through and advocate for democracy. And so to this day, the internet is still shut down. Main telecom companies are having trouble accessing internet, for the past couple of weeks as well. And so that's just kind of what our situation entails. And so given all of that context, we want to get into some of the more discussion-based parts of this event that we have for you all. But first, before we do that, we want to introduce our speakers. So meeting our guests. And so we have for you here today, our first guest, Bayadir Muhammad Osman. So she's a Sudanese American public health professional and poet based in Maryland. She's currently pursuing her Master's of Public Health at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Currently, she provides young adults with disabilities, professional development, and supports their meaningful employment. She's performed in Philadelphia, Denver, Dallas, and Los Angeles, to name a few cities. Her poetry examines her intersectional identity as a Black Muslim Sudanese woman. And she uses her platform and voice to advocate for marginalized communities and her home country of Sudan. So it's great to meet you, Bayadir, and thank you for joining us today. And we have our next panelist is Mazen Khalil. So Mazen is a Nubian activist, professor, and aspiring physician. He is one of the co-founders of the Sudanese Americans for Nonviolent Demonstrations, the Kandaka Official, and the founder of the Sudanese Youth Network. With his MPH in epidemiology and biostatistics, he volunteered with the Sudanese Community Medical Response Team to help alleviate the effects of COVID-19 in Sudan. And Mazen is the reigning Muslim New Yorker of the Year. And you can connect with him with the social media handle at Fianki, is how you say it, Fianki, which is right there. And yeah, thank you all for joining us today. So we can go ahead and get into some of the questions that we had. Before we had a Q&A. So at the end, we'll have opportunity for Q&A. But first, we just wanted to ask you all, and in your own, I guess, perspectives and opinions, what do you think needs to happen, for this to come and end? What do you see in your eyes? And I guess whoever wants to take it first, and then we can flip-flop to the other.
All right. Thank you so much for the awesome introduction, Ashraf, and the great contacts, background information. Really shout out to the e-board for putting this together, for organizing this, for getting this done in such a last minute. So we really appreciate you guys, especially since it's midterm season. So kudos to the team. Moving forward to this question, so what do you think needs to happen for this to come to an end? I think the people in Sudan, the resistance looks like it shall continue, because that is the way they see this will end. So I'm usually, when it comes to community organizing and my views on what should happen in Sudan, I always defer to the people who are living it, and the community organizer and the activists and those who are sacrificing their life and their freedom to lead the way. And what they are demanding is for Burhan to step down, for there to be justice, for Hamdok to be released, and for any other political detainee to be released, and for a full sovereign government that's voted for by the people to be back into place, back into our sovereign council. So that's what I think should, that's the only way for this to come to an end, is until the people of the streets are satisfied and they see a reflection of themselves in the government.
Hi, everybody. Excuse me. Thank you to the e-board for putting on this event. I'm really honored to be here and amongst you all. And I thank you for this opportunity. I think in order for all of this to come to an end, it's as Bayadir said, she said it so eloquently and perfectly. I think people really underestimate the desire of the Sudanese people to have a fully functional, autonomous, civilian elected government. And the only way that this is going to come to an end is, as Bayadir said, for the Prime Minister Hamdok to be released, for political detainees who were elected or appointed, whatever term you want to use, although they were technically elected, for those people to be released, and for there to be a fully functional, autonomous civilian government. I don't think the streets will stop. I know some of us are cut off from information from back home, but I'm 100% positive that even right now that they are in the streets, protesting, building blockades, and they're out there. And so it won't come to an end unless we realized the goals of the beginning of the revolution in 2019, which is a full autonomous civilian government.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you said. Thank you, for your answers on that. And I guess next off, we also just wanted to know, in a I guess in a quick overview as well, like how do you think the foreign intervention will affect the situation there, and how is it already affecting it, and where do you see that kind of playing out?
I know from what I've been hearing and what I've been reading and kind of from my connects, what's been happening currently is that it seems that the world initially was going to pressure the civilian side of the transitional government to kind of essentially agree to a military, like the military being present the whole time, which would completely undermine the will of the Sudanese people and what we want back home, which is for there to be no military involvement in the government and the role of the military to be simply to defend the country, to defend the borders and not be involved in affairs. Now it seems that, you know, a couple of countries have shifted and have decided, okay, maybe let's backtrack a little bit. And I think part of that is them realizing like the people are out on the streets and they're not going to go home until this happens, you know, until their demands are met and until we reach the point in which we have just a fully functional civilian government. But unfortunately, because of the situation in the country, as you mentioned, we've had a sanction for 30 years. There's a lot of things that in terms of development, we're a little behind, you know? And so because of that behindness in terms of development, foreign governments, foreign entities think that they can kind of pressure us using that way. You know, hey, you need money, we have the money, but because we have the money, you have to agree to our terms and conditions. Our terms and conditions include this, propping up, for example, the military, continuing to have military be involved in political affairs and things of that nature. So I hope that, you know, foreign actors realize that this isn't going to happen, you know, that the military is not going to be in charge, and that at the end of the day, what will come to fruition is what the demands of the streets are, which is for a civilian rule.
Honestly, in the most ideal fashion, in the most ideal world, I would see the foreign actors to truly step aside and to let the people there lead in whatever fashion that they deem fit. However, knowing that Sudan has rich resources and education and people who haven't really been tapped into yet, moments of our weakness like these, I feel like countries, foreign countries, might take advantage of our weaknesses, unfortunately, and make decisions or pressure Burhan in a certain direction for their own benefit. As we've seen other countries, Egypt, and we've seen UAE and Saudia, and all these other countries take advantage of Sudanese people, whether for our war, using us as soldiers, for our land, for our oil, seeing the developments, international development, you know, Chinese laborers, all these different outside forces coming into Sudan. And we have a long history of just being exploited in general. You know, as like going back to this YouTube video we saw, it literally said how US and other countries broke Sudan. So unfortunately, foreign intervention, it has to be done in a very strategic, compassionate, and a human, and it has to be done in a way that the Sudanese people actually want it in. So that's when it gets very tricky. And I'm pretty, I don't want to say doubtful, I'm hesitant for when a country does want to get involved, to what degree and for what reason. So I think foreign intervention gets a little tricky, and I think as long as we're like, you know, doing our research about specific countries and leaders and why are they so interested in one direction. For instance, recently Egypt's leaders did not sign the agreement, sign the document that other countries like Saudi, I believe, in Dubai, and there was one more country that signed it that wanted the Burhan to give up power, but Egypt was one of the only countries that did not sign it in their area. So, you know, just being skeptical of either side, of them being supportive and not supportive, because there's consequences to either one. There's pros and cons. Just like Mazen said, you know, the US currently stopped our aid. Millions and millions of dollars has been paused right now for Sudanese people. So that sends a message to Burhan, you know, that scares Burhan, but at the same time, that's aid that's not going to be going to our people. So this question is super tricky to me because there's so many different intentions involved, and there's histories and contexts and relationships with each of these countries that varies and has pros and cons. So this is I think it's a very tricky question. And I think as long as the people in Sudan are clear with exactly what type of foreign intervention they want, and I'll give a specific example. The Sudanese people really want an investigation on the June 3rd massacre, and they want an investigation on Darfur, and they want an investigation on the 30-year dictatorship. And even with the protests that have been going on for the past 2 weeks, they want investigations. But do they want that to be done nationally by our own Sudanese courts, or do they want that to be completed by the International Criminal Court? So even little questions like that, we have to think about, what do the Sudanese people on ground want? Do they want foreign intervention, or do they want us to do it, homegrown and locally? So I kind of made the question a little bit more complicated. Nazin, did you want to hop in on anything I said?
No, I think you said everything very beautifully. I think the only thing that is really important that I would be remiss if I didn't mention is that people don't really understand just how bountiful Sudan is, right? And so what I mean by that is, and if you go back and read like all of literature about Sudan, you'll find that it's often called Africa's breadbasket, right? And the reason why that is because we can produce so much, and you also find that, for example, there was a point in time in our history in which the Sudanese pound, one single Sudanese pound, was equivalent to $3 US, right? That means there was a point in history in which our currency was much stronger than the US currency. And so when you begin to think about this, and you begin to think about just what it is that Sudan offers, it kind of unfortunately, quote unquote, makes sense, that all these foreign actors are intervening because of just our resources and things of that nature. And unfortunately, that is going, I don't foresee that not hampering with what it is that we want as a people, and our desire to have a civilian government, because unfortunately what's happened for the past 30 years is that our government is stolen from people, has put resources that should have gone towards people in its own pockets and things of this nature, and the international community turned a blind eye to it for 30 years. So I don't think that it's one of those situations where the international community didn't really know what's going on. It's more so you see this but turn a blind eye to it. And so if for the sake of the international community, I think a lot of people in a lot of countries are going to be like, okay, we want the status quo to come back, because if it doesn't come back, it's going to shake up a lot of tables.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Mazen. So that's why even having foreign intervention lately, it's pretty tricky. We want them to involve, but the thing is, it's like they know what's going on. It's like, as we say, Sudanese people are not voiceless. People just kind of don't want to listen. And we have to ask ourselves, why do they not want to listen? Are they benefiting from our suffering? Are they benefiting from our, our cheap items that they're stealing from our grounds? Are they literally using our people? They're using Sudanese young men in this Yemen war. Like, there's a lot of things along that nature that we have to ask ourselves, like, maybe they don't really care. And the thing is, I'm not pointing to a specific country, but in general, asking ourselves, do they care? Why don't they care? Do they know? It's kind of complex question.
Definitely. No, and I think, like someone mentioned in the chat, that was very well said and articulated in both of the points that you made. I also appreciate your answers there as well. And even just so another question we also had, I guess this is more of a futuristic type of outlook question, maybe a little bit more philosophical, but in your eyes each, what is your ideal Sudan? Like what is something you would want to see maybe in your generation, in your lifetime, or even ahead of then as well?
So I guess I'll kind of go first. I mean, I will give you guys, I want Sudan to be successful and amazing and all of these beautiful things. I think the poet in me kind of wants to say, I don't know what that Sudan would look like, because I haven't seen it. And I think we're all trying to relearn our relationship with Sudan. And I think that's what the revolution, the 2019 revolution did to us, was we had to no longer see Sudan as that place that was just set in stone. We actually saw Sudan as a country where change could happen. And I think it shook a lot of us to the core. And we started thinking of a future for Sudan. And I don't think we had that before. I think most of us, I don't want to call us any of saviors or anything. Most of us growing up, we want to get educated, make a lot of money, go back and help Sudan, aka save Sudan. Pretty much. And that's how we all had, even though we're Sudanese, we had a little bit of a savior complex growing up. We just want to, make a lot of money, go back and donate our money and fix it all up. And the thing is, it's like now it's like we no longer seeing as like we have to save it. It's like we get to build it. And I think that's the subhanAllah, like I'm relearning that thing. And this actually takes me back to when Bashir was overthrown. So my father was like it's freedom fighter in Sudan, and like to the point where he was like exiled from Sudan, had to flee, our whole family had to flee. Because like Bashir personally had like a execution set out for him. But I remember when Bashir was overthrown, my dad was just like, Bayazid, like, who am I now? Like, what is my life purpose now? Bashir is gone. Like, how, like, like if you spent 20 years of your life and 30 years of your life dedicated to this one concept of fearing Sudan and Bashir and corruption, it's like, and then when it's kind of like you see it crumbling in front of your eyes, you're like, okay, well, what's supposed to go there in replace of it? So I'm not even in the part of like what Sudan will look like. It's kind of just trying to detangle all these traumas and fears I have, and the savior complex that I had growing up, and this like pitying it. Now I see it as a country of resistance. Before I didn't really see that. I saw that people surviving. Now I see the resistance and I see the strength. So now I feel like I'm just, in order for us to really build that new Sudan, we really have to unpack what we've carried these past 30 years.
Wow, what a response. I don't know what I'm supposed to say after that, to be honest. But when I saw this question, I thought of actually your poem. You wrote a poem about this. If I remember correctly, it starts like, Dear Sudan, I can't wait to meet the new you, something along those lines. And it kind of got me thinking like, okay, well, what do I think Sudan is? What has it meant for me before, as Bader said, before like we overthrew Bashir, and then what does it mean for me now? And so I think even with my, even in my own perspective, my idea of Sudan has changed. I always used to think about it like in a very academic sense, like, yeah, like our people could have fed all of Africa, and it's a really big country, and you can fit 1/3 of the US in there, so on, and all these things, and post the revolution or post 2019, I started thinking about it a little differently. And so I don't know, I think you guys probably have all seen Black Panther, but if you have, I think of Sudan as Wakanda. It has the potential to be all of these great things, and it just needs the building for it. It just needs the bricks to be put down, and we have the opportunity to do that. And I think that's the really great part. That my ideal Sudan is a place of justice. It's a place where everybody who's been wronged can get their rights. It's a place where we are no longer having to flee home. It's a place where we go back and we're like, okay, this is who I am. This is where I belong. And I know I have had this conversation with a couple of people, especially those of us who have like hyphens, like, Sudanese X's, Sudanese American, Sudanese, whatever it is. I've had this conversation with them. And when we talk about this topic, we talk about a Sudan where we're all welcomed, where we're not just, not Sudanese enough, but whatever hyphen we come with, that makes us fully Sudanese. And I think that's kind of where I see us moving towards. And that's my hope for an ideal Sudan, where, it's a place we all can call home, irrespective of what language we speak, irrespective of our religion, irrespective of our tribe, irrespective of, all of these things, the political party that we belong to. I think of it as home. And I think that's probably the best that I can come up with.
No, that was great. Definitely thank you for sharing, both of your perspectives on that. And even I think it's just something important to think about as in the situation, even that we're currently in, and how it can sometimes like almost be hard to, I guess, remember or think about the future in a situation like this. So there is just one quick last thing I want to touch on in terms of questions that we have for you before we get into the audience and anyone else that just wants to discuss things. But going back to the situation now, right? How can people outside of Sudan help not just diaspora members, but people who aren't Sudanese themselves, who may be looking to ways to support? I mean, especially with the internet being cut out and everything, in the area of Sudan. What do you think is the primary ways for that?
I can go first, Mazen. So I can so the main there's I like to do whatever tool you have in your hand, whatever skill you have, whatever talent you have, it can be put to use in one way or another. For instance, you're really good at scrolling on Twitter. Well, I got a task for you. Go on Twitter, use all the hashtags, retweet all the articles, follow, report, follow what's the word? Credible reporters and journalists and activists on the ground. If you love writing, write a letter to your local elected official, letting them know what's going on in Sudan, demand them to condemn it, and send them the list of specific demands the Sudanese people have. If you like to write poetry like me, write poems. If you like to sing, sing. And then also share in the captions, like, making Sudan, like, you can add this to your life. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like anything you do, you can find a way to move the Sudanese cause. For instance, you like baking, make a bake sale. All the money you make, donate to Sudanese protesters. Like, there's little things that all of us can do. And then also the more traditional ones would also be attending protests, attending events, reading up, researching, following credible individuals. Yeah, so those are the main ones, but I also want people to use unconventional methods to move the message forward and to raise funds.
Absolutely. I really like what Beata said about all of us using whatever tools we have. I think, in having these conversations with people also, they've been like, oh, I'm not an activist. Like, yes, we're all activists. There's an activist in each of us. And you don't have to have the biggest following to be an activist, if somebody has 300 followers on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever it is, if those 300 people know what's going on, then you've done a better job than somebody who has thousands of followers and hasn't spoken about it at all, And so we don't all need big followings to make things happen. I think one thing that we can do, as Beata mentioned, is following credible sources and retweeting those credible sources. There's a lot of things coming out, and a lot of people are, attributing things to sources that may not be credible. So definitely doing due diligence and figuring out, okay, where is this coming from? Who is saying this? Why are they saying this? What goal do they have in saying this? And I think that's really important. A lot of people have also said oh, what difference does it make attending protests? In 2019, our protesting all over the world is what toppled Bashir over, and so making sure that we can attend protests. I know, as students and as people living here in the West, and especially on the East Coast now, it's getting a little colder, we can come up with a million excuses. But if you just, go, if a protest is 3 hours long, you just go out there for an hour, 30 minutes, you've contributed, and so I think that's definitely a way that we can help as well. I hope that we don't see, infrastructure and medical expenses and things like that rise like we did see in 2019. But if that's a case as well, then we can definitely, make fundraisers and try to find ways to send money back home. That was really effective in 2019, and it definitely helped out a lot. So that can also be another method. But just again, reiterating what Beata said, use whatever talent and skill you have to make sure that the people around you at least know what's going on, and that if they know what's going on, they can kind of begin to do their own research, and then inshallah it becomes like a little domino, and they continue to, inform other people, they continue to retweet, to share whatever it is that you're posting. And now instead of one person learning something, you have a whole bunch. Yes, thank you, Beader, for putting that in the chat now. Also going to sudancoup.com is really, that's a really dope resource that a bunch of really amazing people have put together. So definitely visiting that website and entering information about, your local Jalia, for example, or your local group that is working to support Sudan. That way we can have this massive directory and kind of all be connected as well.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for all your insight on that. And I think it's definitely important now, especially to remember. And so I guess just opening this up to anyone who has anything else to say or anything else to ask, questions from the audience. And just a side note, this picture is actually taken in Khartoum on the day after the 30th. So the day of the 31st after the 30th protest. So that was pretty funny in this serious time. But if anyone has anything to ask or contribute to the discussion, feel free. The stage is yours.
Hi, assalamu alaikum. I just have a question for Mazen and Bayad or anyone else on the line. Could you all speak a little bit more to the internet blackout and what that means and how that makes it either easier or difficult? Like, what does that do for the protesters and our brothers and sisters in Sudan? And what does that mean for us who are trying to advocate or just like share resources? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
What a great question, Wafa. Thank you for that. Okay, so the internet has been out since October 25th, the night of October 25th, leading into October 26th. So the day of the coup, essentially, the night of the coup. Currently, if my count is right, I think I may be off a day or so, but I think it's currently at day 18, in which there has been no service in Sudan, no cell service and no internet. And so what this does is it's a tactic that's meant to essentially break apart protesters being able to share information and being able to pass along information. So it makes it really difficult for one part of the country, for example, to organize with another part, and not even the country itself, but like, for example, neighborhoods. It makes it really difficult for neighborhood resistance committees to be able to share information and say, for example, we're having a protest on this day, or come out to this specific neighborhood so that we can all march together and things of that nature. The bigger kind of issue for us and people who are not in Sudan is that it cuts us off from information. So we get tidbits, we have, and what that does is we may be receiving information that is not fully up to date, so sometimes you may get a tweet from somebody in Sudan and that tweet may be 2 days old, because the next time they have cell service or the next time they have access to the internet is a couple of days later, and so many things have transpired since then. And so the bad part about that for us as outsiders and as the diaspora is that we're not up to date in information and up to date in what's going on. We don't have real-time information. And what, personally, my biggest fear is that we'll see what happened on June 3rd again, but to a larger extent, because what happened on June 3rd is that the last day of Ramadan, the service was cut out and a massacre occurred. And so I'm afraid of seeing, this happening for 18 days now, and us not being able to really understand just, the amount of casualties and what's going on.
Yes, Mazen. Thank you for that awesome, really insightful, important question, and then Mazen's insightful answer. In addition to everything that Mazen said, it's also it's a practical tactic used to stop protests, and it's also a psychological. It's a psychological tactic, because it alienates people, it isolates the Sudanese people from each other, and it's extremely unsafe, and it's a human rights violation in terms of cutting people off communication wise, especially during a pandemic, especially just since people are putting their lives at risk on in the streets. So it causes so many safety concerns because emergency preparedness, you know, it gets in the way of emergency preparedness and having connection to the outside world, let alone to, you know, your mother down the street if there's an emergency, and if you're protesting, you know. So it's really a tactic that's intentionally used, that Burhan has recognized that he is using. And when asked about it during the press conference, he said it was because there was incorrect information being spread about him and there was racist comments online. And he said he did it for the betterment of the people, which was a complete lie. It's a betterment of himself. And it's also just another way of, you know, taking away their hypothetical mic, you know, making them appear to be voiceless and complacent when they're truly not. But in opportunities like these, this is when we are here to amplify their voice and be their platform. We have seen the success of international campaigns. For instance, hashtag Justice for Noura, which Wafa is on here now. She was one of the, you know, the head spear of that movement. So we've seen international success with that. We've seen international success with changing our Twitter icons and our social media to the blue handle in remembrance of Muhammad Matar, the martyr, Allah yarhamu. So we have seen the success of international campaigns, and we should not, you know, really downplay the power of a tweet, even though we are very far away and it's not putting our lives at danger in any way. It is still a powerful tool to be used. And then also, this is an opportunity there is currently a campaign for MTN, I want to say, in Zain, which are the two main phone companies in Sudan. There's a campaign right now that is emailing them, tweeting them, pretty much flooding their timelines, asking them why they have allowed for the Sudanese government to turn off phone telecommunications and internet and phone connections for the Sudanese people. So we are even using that as an opportunity to boycott these two companies and to publicly shame them into turning back on the communication for Sudanese people. So there is opportunities for us to step up in this dark Black area, pun intended. And thank you also to the question here by Hela. Sudan Coup has a lot of awesome resources, and thank you for those who've dropped some answers here.
Definitely. No, thank you for your answers to that. And I guess even just going on, I think Reem was someone that asked in the chat, do you think that a lot of the issues, at least politically, stem from tribalism? And a little on the same path, do you see, how would you see a unification of Sudani tribes while still keeping the uniqueness and diversity of those identities?
So for the second half of that question, I would say acknowledging the marginalized communities that we have in Sudan, and those who have more power, aka those in Khartoum, those who have lighter skin, those who have higher social economic status, acknowledge the trauma and the violence we have created for communities, certain specific communities, which can include those in Darfur, those in Kordofan, Blue Nile, also our Nubian community. There are so many different communities in Sudan that we need to acknowledge that we have really hurt. So I think that's the way we need to unify, is by taking accountability for the injustices and the violence we perpetrated, whether that means literally in the wars, the South Sudan war, or even just in our regular everyday conversation. Like, how do you change a culture that no longer uses stereotypes and no longer has this colorism, or no longer tries to put people into different classes based off their parents' educational status? So I think that's the way to unify Sudan, is to take accountability and to learn the real history of how we've marginalized so many people and to provide them reparations for what we've done. So yeah, I think that's the way to have that balance. Mazen, did you want to add on?
I think beautifully answered, Beader, and I would definitely agree with you. I think one of the things that we tend to do when we talk about marginalized communities is kind of stick our head in the sand, and we kind of refuse to address this topic. And that's part of the problem, you know. unless we as Sudanese take accountability for things that we've all done, you know, and our country has done, and acknowledging that there are people who have been marginalized and that there are people who've experienced injustices and we've kind of turned a blind eye towards it, then we're really not going to get anywhere. But an acknowledgement is usually the first path towards healing. And I think acknowledging that like Sudan is diverse and that Sudan is a beautiful place that's made up of all these different peoples, groups of peoples, different tribes, you know, different not nationalities, we're all the same, but different like geographical locations is going to be one of the first steps, and that we have marginalized certain groups of people. It's going to be the first step to that. Do I think that a lot of our political issues stem from tribalism? I think tribalism is tied to it, and I'll kind of explain why. So for people who are marginalized, all we have is our tribes, you know? They're the ones who essentially protect us, and they're the ones who essentially provide for us when the government doesn't, you know? And so in that sense, yes, you know, we feel like people may feel like I can't trust the government, and so therefore I'm going to turn to my tribe. And you know, if somebody from my tribe is running for election, I'm going to vote for that person. Yeah, that ties into it. But I think the bigger issue is that really, to be honest, Sudan is run by three really big families. You know, you have these three really politically powerful families that essentially make decisions and that have made decisions for a long time. And that if you have the backing of, you know, one of these families, let alone three families, then you're set to go. And so that kind of causes a problem for us. And you know, irrespective of what that does for other people, we sometimes have the self-interest, and that self-interest kind of goes back into ignoring other people. You know, okay, if I can progress forward without, you know, by selling out another group, for example, not mentioning issues that are happening in places like Darfur, Shamalia, Kurdistan, the Blue Nile State, all these places, and it can advance my political career, then who cares? I'm going to do that, you know, and that's part of the problem itself. And so it's a really tough question. Even it's a very complicated one. It's a very intricate one. So I can't really give you like a direct yes or no answer. So
Same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was the first one that I was like, I don't even know if I can touch that question. I think tribalism. If someone would have asked me if what is the stem of our issues, I might have said greed, I might have said capitalism, and I might have said colonialism. I don't think tribalism would have been in my top five. And I might have even thrown in some racism in there. But I would have never really said tribalism, but I truly might not be educated, but it's a combination of me not being educated on the effects of tribalism, but also coming from a family. I'm from Kassala / Port Sudan. So in our community, tribalism is a sense of pride and is a sense of that's all we got because we're not connected to Khartoum. So I see it in the terms of Mazen. I've had my personal experiences with tribes not be in terms of like hating another one, for instance. It's been like a sense of just pride in community. But that's my experience, and my experience might not be I might not be sensitive to other tribes who have suffered more. So that's why I kind of stayed away from answering that question.
Definitely. No, thank you for your input on that. And does anyone have anything else to add or any other questions further in the chat? I think I was trying to look through, but I'm not sure if I saw any. But if anyone wants to go ahead and speak as well, you have the stage. So
yeah, does anyone have any thoughts? Reem, what do you think? Reem, with that hard question, Miss Reem Ali, look, say sister. Look, it was a hard question. And if anybody else has some input, we have about 10 minutes. We'd love to hear everyone's thoughts and how everybody's taking care of themselves during this difficult period and how we're making sure we're not getting burned out. Because I know you guys are students and trying your best to organize and stay educated on what's going on. So I'll open it up. Go ahead, Reem. تفضلي, no problem.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is
Hey,
Nihal.
Nihad.
Yeah, thank you all for having this discussion, for providing this platform. It's always wonderful when Sudanese people get together and just talk. But hearing you guys' responses, Mazen and Bayadir, were wonderful. And I just want to say, Bayadir, something you said earlier about reconnecting and relearning our relationship to Sudan really resonated with me, because I think to some extent, all of us being in the Sudanese diaspora are to some extent, experiencing some form of identity crisis, right? And also survivor's guilt. Whether we were forced to leave, whether we left because it was our family's choice, to make better, have a better future for their children. We kind of have that guilt of leaving and not being there. And I think revolution and resistance is in our blood. It always has been. And it provides a way for us to tap into our Sudanese identity when we do take part. So even though, a lot of people might feel that, I'm here, what can I do? I feel useless, right? I'm not on the ground. I'm not out in the streets protesting with them. But like you said, Bayadir, like any skill you have, any talent that you have, you can use it in an abundance of ways, a variety of ways. And it really matters. It really makes a difference. And so I think it just, for me, makes me so proud, because how many revolutions have we had in Sudan, right? And the fact that our generation gets to experience that and see that and take part in it and make a difference as we have in 2019, that really just makes me so proud to be Sudanese, and it makes it easier for me to define that identity for myself.
Thank you, Nihad. Thank you for the beautiful reminder. It is truly in our blood. I see Hala's hand, and then after Hala, I was actually, if you guys recall, my mom's on here, and she was actually in Sudan during the coup. She was there for like first couple days, and then she got on one of the first flights. If you guys wanted to hear her experience of literally what was happening on ground too, but I saw Hala's hand, so
No, let your mom speak first.
Yeah,
I can wait.
okay. Well, she's in the other room. Let me teach her how to unmute real quick. Be right back. Let me go show her how to unmute.
Okay, well, while she's doing that, maybe I'll just put in that tomorrow, inshallah, not tomorrow, Saturday, inshallah, Bayadir was talking about using our skill sets to do what we can. Myself, I'm a master's student in clinical counseling, and I'm pairing with Malaz Ibrahim, who's a social work student, to put together a check-in. The information is on the Sudan Coup upcoming events site, and I just put the link into the chat. So hopefully it won't, interfere with the protest times that are happening. But yeah, inshallah, just, doing what you can to make sure that y'all are feeling safe and taking care of yourselves, because we can only take care of others and take care of our communities when we ourselves are feeling well. So yeah, it would be good to see y'all there.
الو السلام عليكم. في البداية أنا فخورة جدا جدا بكم كلكم. إن شاء الله ربنا يحفظكم كلكم، يعني رغم إنكم ما تربيتوا في السودان، لكن كلكم يعني قلوبكم وحاجاتكم كلها يعني مع الشباب الموجودين هناك. وأنا يعني بأكد لكم الشباب الموجودين هناك يعني في حوجة شديدة لكم خالص خالص خالص، يعني تعملوا بكل المستطاع اللي حتقدروا تعملوه. كان كتبت لكم مسج صغيرة قلت لكم السودان يعني كأنه في كود بلو، وإنتوا CPR اللي حتيجي تعملوه، يا السودان دحية ويا بقى ما موجود، لأنه خلاص في آخر الأنفاس بتاعته. أنا كان مفروض أسافر نفسي يوم الانقلاب، يوم 25. بكم ساعة حصل الانقلاب، البلد كلها اتغيرت. يعني هو بيقول لك الحياة اتوفرت واتلقت، ما في حاجة موجودة. النساء بتلقين من الساعة 2 صباحا واقفين في الشوارع للصف بتاع الرغيف، للصف بتاع الأكل. الحياة أسعار غالية. الشباب كلهم في الشارع. المنظر بالضبط اللي أنا شفته يوم القيادة، حضرته هنا في التلفزيون، بتاع الناس اللي كانوا بيضربوا الشباب، كان في كل شارع موجود. يعني كانوا شايلين عصيان وبيضربوا الأولاد وحتى عندنا واحد قريبنا يعني كان جاي بس من سفر، طلع برا حلقوا له شعره والبنت قطعوا له شعره. وضرب شديد شباب هم ديل يعني الخريجين الجامعات اللي هم ما عندهم شغل، اللي هم ما بيملكوا أي حاجة، يعني حتى آمال ما عندهم أي حاجة، يعني لا حاجة مادية ولا حاجة معنوية ولا أحلام ولا يعني شباب يعني مقهور في بلده. يعني مش القهر الحاصل له من الحكومة، من الجيش بتاعه اللي هو مفروض يحرسه، جايب له ناس من دول تانية عشان يضربوه ويهينوه ويحرسوه. يعني المشكلة أكبر من إنه يكون السودان وطن، المشكلة في إنه الإنسان البني آدم ما عنده قيمة، الشاب الصغير ما عنده قيمة، الطفل ما عنده قيمة. يعني حاجة محزنة ومؤسفة جدا. أنا طلعت بالصدفة، مشيت عشان أسافر، بالصدفة واحد بيتكلم في تلفون من الناس القدام في الحكومة ما بعرفه، عرفتوا إنه مقوم لي طيارة، فقلت له أنا حسافر معك محل ما أنت ماشي. فاكتشفت الطيارة اللي أنا مشيت فيها دي كل الناس عندهم تلفونات وكلهم عندهم نت، وأنا شايلة تلفون من هنا من أمريكا ما كان فيه نت، ما كنت قادرة أتصل، ما قادرة يتكلم. أكثر الأسر عيانين، عندهم كوفيد، عندهم سكري، عندهم أمراض، عندهم ما في زول قادر يصل لدكتور، ما في زول قادر يشتري حاجة. وهم الجماعة مع بعض ديل كلهم عندهم التلفونات، عندهم النت، عندهم الحياة كلها في العربات السايقينها، يعني ما فيها غبار، ما فيها وساخة، كأنه منزلين عليهم بهليكوبتر، عربات نظيفة كأنه قاعدين برا السودان، متحركين، حاجاتهم ماشية. حتى الزول اللي أنا ماشي هو يطلعني على الطيارة بيقول لهم أنت ما عندك؟ قال لي لا، إحنا جبنا الإستاف بتاعنا من الحمالين لحد الطيارين. يعني الناس دي هم كانوا مرتبين حياتهم جاهزة، وما حاجة كانت وليدة لحظة، ما حاجة يعني قامت في شهر ولا في شهرين، الحاجة دي كانوا مخططين لها من بدري. السودان ده ما فكوه، والسودان ده لسه هم ماسكينه ولسه عاملين كنترول لكل الحاجات، الأكل، حياة الشراب، العلاج، السفر، التذاكر، النت، الحكومة. يعني حتى الحكومة الموجودة والشباب اللي ماتوا فيها والثورة اللي عملوها، يعني ديل شغالين بيعملوا قدر يعملوا، لكن الناس ذيك لسه موجودين، الناس ذيك لسه موجودين يعني هم قادرين يتواصلوا مع بعض وحاجاتهم ماشية والحياة بيناتهم ماشية. وكل الشباب اللي إنه زيكم ديل أنتوا بتشوفوهم في الشارع، يعني حاجة الواحد ما يعني عايز عديل يتعالج من الصور الشافة للشباب. يعني الحيوانات ما بتقدر يتعامليها نفس المعاملة تعاملوها. الشوارع بيخطوا فيها الطوب، بيجيبوا يضربوهم وبيخلوهم ينقلوا الطوب كلهم يملوا بيها العربات، وبعد ده يعني ضرب ويمسكوهم يحلقوا شعرهم وعذاب. ويعني ما قادرة أنا طبعا أحكي لكم، يعني افتكرت الحاجة انتهت من الثورة الفاتت، لكن الثورة هي كانت ديك اللي اتعاملت الكبيرة دي، كانت ديك يا داب الشرارة. وحسي أنا بوصيكم وبقول لكم السودان ده حقكم، وإنتوا اللي حتحفظوه، وإنتوا اللي حتطلعوه من جديد، وإنتوا اللي في يدكم CPR اللي حتعملوه ده عشان ترجعوا السودان. وإلا لو ما عملتوا حاجة كل حاجة حتكون انتهت. وكلمة إنه تاني السودان ونحن السودانيين ونمشي للسودان ودي حتكون ما موجودة، لأنه الناس الموجودين دول ناس تانيين، أخلاقهم تانية، أطباعهم تانية، أشكالهم تانية، ناس سيلفيش يعني. ومعليش يعني أمسك وقت من وقتكم، بس لأني أنا حضرت الانقلاب حبيت يعني أدخل لكم أحكي لكم من الحاجة اللي أنا شفتها. فأنا يعني فخورة جدا 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 بكم، واعتبروا دي نقطة الشرارة يا داب أنتوا، وفي شغل كتير كتير حارسكم عشان ترجعوا السودان، ترجعوا للشباب اللي هم حارسينكم هناك، اللي هم ما عندهم كرامة بتاعت البني آدم، مش تعليم ولا صحة ولا حاجة، بس كرامة البني آدم بس، يعني ما يحصل لهم قهر. وإن شاء الله ربنا يحفظكم ويقويكم. السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام وشكرا لك لكلماتك والله. والله إن شاء الله البلد تكون أحسن. I mean, this is just what we all want, and I mean, thank you for everyone else who spoke with their words as well. And I think this was just a really good space to have and to continue, you know, building support moving forwards and networking. I think, and shout out to Ilham as well, who's in the call, for getting together these Sudanese, you know, sandstorm series. There are going to be a bunch more at other universities across the world, really. And even an event. I don't know if she wants to speak anything about that, but I think there's even going to be another event this coming week at the Harvard Kennedy School. And so definitely very exciting to see. And yeah, and thank you everyone once again for coming out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Ashraf, and thank you everyone at the e-board here for a wonderful event. Shukran Bayadir and Mazin for your beautiful sentiments as well. It's really inspiring to see you talk with, you know, such eloquence and a lot of thoughtfulness about Sudan. So, you know, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Like I should have said, we have an event next Tuesday as well at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, a panel event, and the webcast is free and open for everyone. So you can search Sudanese Sandstorm Series on social media. Also, the link is bit.ly/Sudan event HKS. So you can go to that also and sign up.
Thank you again, everyone.
Definitely. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming out, and be sure to stay tuned with the future events, not only the Sudanese Sandstorms, but also with our SSU here at Hopkins. I linked the social medias for both our SSU page and the Sudanese Sandstorm in the chat. So be sure to give that a follow if you get the chance. And our wonderful panelists as well on social media. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming out.
Thank you again, Ashraf, for having us.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Thank you for coming with that. Everyone else in the call. All right.
Thank you, Ashraf, for organizing this so fast.
Yeah, no problem. I had the help of everyone else, and it's been great.
And Alad, you're on the board, so thank you. And AB, thank you, you're on the board.
AB put together the whole PowerPoint, like
shout out to AB.
So
did that.
I'll do it.
Thank you guys. No, I had help.
And Aya too.
Definitely. All right.
Hopefully we'll connect again.
Yeah, thank you guys for your contribution and everything.
Yeah, no, truly, thank you for answering all of those questions and everything. You did a great job. Your answers were amazing.
Oh, I can
thank you.